Hey guys, it's Mitch. How's it going? We're getting back to the 90s proper today. We're looking at Death's Head 2 number 1, not Death's Head 1 number 2. And just before we get started, I want to remind you guys that the Kickstarter for Blood Force number 1 is now live. It has launched. Blood Force is the comic that I've been working on for 3 years, and we're on track to get it fully funded. So now's the time to get in on it, get your physical copies, get your prints, get your original art, because that is available. Get one of the 4 variant covers, or get all of the 4 variant covers. The project's running for 30 days, and I'm hoping that we can at least reach that first stretch goal so we can get the book fully colored. So check it out now. Link is in the description. Get your orders in, because clock is ticking on this. Okay, so back to Death's Head. So the Death's Head comic is interesting because it was part of the Marvel UK line, which had been running since the 70s, largely doing reprints of American Marvel comics. And then in the early 90s, in the post-Image wave, there was a push to make Marvel UK its own independent imprint. Well, not fully independent. They wanted to try and integrate at least some Marvel characters into it regularly. The character of Death's Head was one that was familiar to Marvel UK readers. He had his own miniseries in 1989, and there's actually an interesting timeline before that, because it started with those reprints that were going on in the mid-80s. The Marvel Superheroes ones, they did okay here and there. But the big thing that sold over the UK was the licensed comics. So we're talking stuff like Real Ghostbusters, Care Bears, Thundercats, and most notably Transformers. The Transformer comics seem to have been very popular in the UK in 1987, around there. They were running it weekly because that's the way you do comics in the UK, which seems fucking nuts to me, but they were routinely reprinting those Transformers stories, and the Transformers UK comics ran up to the 300s. I think that's still mostly down to reprinting the North American Transformers comics, because that got up to issue 80, and the way they do it, they just break an issue down into, I guess, roughly 4 equal pieces, and then release each of those instead of once a month. They release it 4 times a month. And one of the characters who popped up in Transformers for the first time was Death's Head, and he seemed to pop up in there a little bit anyway. That was kind of his early home. He's a time-traveling bounty hunter who doesn't have any allegiances, and he seemed to have at least a little bit of popularity, enough that they were willing to try his own miniseries. I think ran for 12 issues. And some interesting names on those 12 issues. Brian Hitch does, I think, the majority of the penciling work on those early issues, and that would be a pretty young Brian Hitch. So in the early 90s, in the post-Image wave, Marvel was riding the bubble, and they were pushing to get more properties out on the shelves. So yeah, there's the whole Marvel UK line, which they wanted to use to feature a whole new batch of books. These would lean a little bit away from the superhero kind of theme, although, the characters still seem an awful lot like superheroes. But they would all have kind of a cyberpunk feel to them, and there's some pretty good titles for some of these. You think of some of the crap that Marvel would come out with in the early 90s trying to copy Image Comics. So you get stuff like Force Works and Fantastic Force, because if you put Force in a title, that's going to make it sell better. Marvel UK had titles like Motormouth, Kill Power, Knights of Pendragon, and my personal favorite, Warheads. That's such a great name for a comic. That's also a comic about mercenaries. And I remember seeing ads for the Marvel UK line and thinking it didn't look any kind of good. From what I remember, it was basically like the Marvel UK line was to Marvel as Brigade was to Youngblood. Essentially the same thing, only kind of crappier looking. I don't think that's the case, taking a closer look at some of those books. Again, Brian Hitch is all over those things, as is Gary Erskine, and a lot of those books look pretty competent. So I don't know, maybe there were a few in there that weren't quite up to snuff, but I feel like for the most part, those books carried their weight. One day I'm going to have to take a closer look at the Marvel UK line so that I can verify. But anyway, from everything I can tell, the centerpiece for the Marvel UK line was Death's Head 2, which is Death's Head reimagined. This is taking the Death's Head character, which was a pretty cool bounty hunter character, and just updating him for the 90s. We can see right here on the cover what the new version of Death's Head is going to look like. He's going to have all sorts of armor. He's going to have a skull face, as well as horns and a gun arm, and way too many pockets. He's also going to be done in a pretty extreme style by emerging talent, and one of the guys who had the biggest early impact from the Marvel UK line in Liam Sharp. Death's Head 2 was the first time I ever heard the name Liam Sharp. It certainly looked interesting. Again, I think at the time I was kind of colored by the Marvel UK line wasn't up to snuff with Marvel Comics. So I remember being kind of lukewarm on Liam Sharp the first few times I saw him. It's like, yeah, it's just kind of a rip-off of Image stuff. Taking a closer look, no, I don't think so. I think this is fully formed. Liam Sharp did get some work in on that original Death's Head series. So he'd been around for a little while at least, and at this time, he's pretty much a fully fledged comic artist ready to become a superstar. I'm not sure if he got all the way up there, in terms of reputation anyway, but he's certainly held in high esteem these days. So yeah, we can get right into it. Starting with the cover, we've got our Death's Head 2 character who looks all super badass. We've got the Death's Head 1 character here, or at least what's left of him, his torn up head. And we've got a complete lack of backgrounds. That is all very 90s. Some nice finish on this too. Like most of this stuff in the armor, makes a fair amount of sense. There's maybe some disconnected lines here, but I think that's just to make room for all of the cables and everything that are hanging off of the head. You gotta like all of the detail in the severed Death's Head. Like with the phone cords, and what I'm pretty sure is a spine here in the middle. That's some pretty great looking stuff. So, okay, we're going to start things off with Death's Head. We're going to start with a first-person perspective narration from Death's Head. He's on a mission, a bounty hunter mission. Not a standout kind of mission where this is the beginning of some huge plot, not in and of itself. This is just kind of business as usual for Death's Head. So we're going to set Death's Head up, in case you're not familiar, as this pretty intimidating bounty hunter character. And we're going to start off with some Starscape stuff here. That does look pretty nice. Interesting choices on the colors, going primarily purple and green. At least it contrasts okay. But the structures here, they all look pretty sound. There's some nice shadow going on. There's some nice use of blacks apart from just the starfield. So we get Death's Head infiltrating into the compound. I will say the beginning of this story seems very much like a typical Liefeld story, where Death's Head is going to infiltrate a compound and just wipe out a whole bunch of nobodies on his search for the big nobody. So that's pretty much what we're going to get here as he sneaks in, gets behind a few guards who he gives the impression are not impressive, and dispatches them very easily. Reinforcements start coming. He's wiping them out again with very little effort. So again, you get that Liefeld Extreme Studios kind of feel, where just there's no stakes. At least not yet. This is very early on in the comic. This is fucking page 3, for Christ's sake. As long as you're willing to turn things around, you can totally do this, where you just set your guy up to be an unstoppable badass, so that later on you can introduce a bigger badass and give the first badass a challenge, because that's how you actually make the story intriguing. Again, this was the part Liefeld never got to. But you look at these early pages, this is some damn good stuff. I love the black and white balance in this. He's going pretty heavily on the shadow. There's a lot of rendering on the legs that feels more than a little pointless. And that feels like it has a very Liefeld kind of bent to it. Get our no panel border kind of panel here with the close-up on Death's Head. And Death's Head is looking a fair bit more aggressive than usual. These nobody guards here look pretty good. There's a fair amount of detail involved with them. This square-headed dude here at first, it's kind of like, but then you get a close-up. Oh, there's some nice textures going on in here. Not worrying too much about the background, not at this time. We checked our background box on that first page when we were kind of setting the scene. Here, unnecessary. Here, cross-hatching is absolutely fine. And you get to stuff like this. This is feeling like almost Stephen Platt type stuff, but I think this is before Stephen Platt. This is 93? Not even 92. Yeah, this is way before Stephen Platt. Just taking a quick look at Liam Sharp's Wikipedia page. They don't say much about his influences. They do say he got a lot of work in before he got to work on Death's Head, and then transitioned over to North American Marvel. So ABC Warriors and Judge Dredd seems to be the big ticket items on there. But whatever he was doing, they definitely prioritize fundamentals, because this is absolutely fantastic looking stuff. The colorist is helping out a lot by making the nobodies all a single color, and then, going full color on Death's Head himself, standing him out nicely. Again, going heavy duty, not quite screen door backgrounds, just, like regular kind of cross-hatching, as if you were cross-hatching muscle. And then just smaller panels, again, that feel a little bit evocative of Stephen Platt. I don't think Stephen Platt has ever said that Liam Sharp was an influence of his, so this just kind of seems to be a bit of a coincidence, like a confluence of styles. But, great 2-3 spread. And we're going to follow that up. So yeah, he's wiped everybody out, and now he's moving further into the installation, so we're going to get a great full body shot here. No background. We don't need backgrounds. Backgrounds are for suckers. Again, paying attention to light and shadow, too, to make sure there's a little bit of black balance in the figure, which isn't something that everybody remembers to do. So, okay, Death's Head moves further into the installation. He gets inside like a big room here and finds that a whole bunch of those soldiers that he took out earlier, there was more, only somebody else took them out further. And the room's all smoky, probably from smoke from gun barrels, right? But he can see his target, who has been strung up way further down in this hangar-type room. And somebody's there with him. But, nice shot here, going for a low angle, like extreme low angle. That's good stuff. And like this whole page, like this is the kind of page that should go up on auction and fetch quite a bit of money. So Death's Head comes a little closer, finds his target, and he's being seen to by this guy here whose name is Minion. And turns out Minion is basically doing Death's Head's job for him. And while he's taking out Death's Head's target, whose name is Tyler, he says instincts assimilated, which Death's Head notes. Pretty good spread here. I feel like this giant image could have been done quite a bit more dramatically. You know, the angle he took going straight profile on these two here, I'm not a huge fan of that. That feels a little bit amateurish, but I mean, the rest of this is pretty good. There's a feel to some of the rendering here that, like, particularly with this stuff here, that reminds me of Barry Windsor Smith. I mean, I'm probably thinking directly of Weapon X with the way he's all tied up with cables here and everything. I'm not sure if I see it too much. That looks a little bit like that classic image of Wolverine. So I wonder if that's where one of the things Liam Sharp was looking at the time. So Minion has eliminated Death's Head's target, which means Death's Head can't collect on it anymore. And Minion isn't interested in explaining to Death's Head why exactly he's here. He's just another target on Minion's list. Apparently Minion's list is pretty long. But now that he's got it completed, he doesn't have any business here. Tells Death's Head, you know, don't worry about it. I'm not dealing with you right now, but I will come back around. And then he teleports out. But not before Death's Head is able to, I guess, enter his, I don't know, like maybe his life signs into his tracking device here. That seems to be pretty much the case. You know, all decent looking stuff. I like all the full figure stuff we're getting here. It's always interesting looking at stuff like this, this particular cross-hatching pattern, when it's from somewhere outside of one of the big two, because they got very particular about the kind of cross-hatching patterns they would usually use. And this is just not really it for this teleporter effect. I mean, you know, it looks fine. I'd say it looks pretty good. It's just a little unfamiliar, even though the rest of the style it definitely has like an extreme kind of feel. But I would say a bit more solid in terms of fundamentals than some of the extreme artists, like even some of the big names. So Minion teleports back to his headquarters in the far-flung future of 2020. And it seems like this is AIM Central, so that's who Minion's working for. And he's kind of a major project for AIM at the time, where AIM has this list. And the point of Minion seems to be that instincts assimilated thing he was saying earlier, where he kills off his subjects, and it's pretty self-explanatory. He assimilates part of his target's personality. And his boss here seems to be Dr. Necker. I wonder if that's meant to be a little bit of a pun. She wants him to get checked out before he goes back out on another mission. He's not really too interested in that. He's being kind of mouthy, which the Minion character apparently hasn't been before this. So it seems like absorbing all of these personalities and instincts has been changing the personality of the Minion character. So he sticks around for a quick second before he starts to head out again. Dr. Necker asks him any problems with this particular target. Minion says not really, except Death's Head was there. And then before Dr. Necker can ask him anything further, he finishes teleporting. Nice sequence here, nicely paced actually, like keeping it pretty quick. And this big establishing shot of the laboratory for AIM Central here. This is pretty nicely built, and there's a lot of detail in here. So yeah, it feels like Liam Sharp ascribes to the philosophy of you only show backgrounds in establishing shots. That way, you know, the audience knows where the characters are. After that, you don't need to show like friggin' anything. I'm on board with this philosophy. And the Dr. Necker character, you know, she's kind of standard issue for the mid-90s, where she's got her skin-tight lycra suit, she's got her giant hair. Again, it feels a little bit like Stephen Platt proportions. So yeah, it's just kind of interesting. There's like these parallel guys who are coming up at pretty much the same time that it feels like didn't influence each other, but still kind of arrived at similar places. Okay, so from the AIM laboratory, we're going to cut to a budget meeting. So, I mean, first of all, that's not super exciting, but it's interesting, and it's like fairly well scripted. This is written by, I didn't say who was writing this thing, did I? I probably should have done that. Story on this is by Dan Abnett. Dan Abnett is a name we saw before, I believe on Forceworks. That wasn't very good, but Dan Abnett did do a whole bunch of comics, did a whole bunch of fiction books as well. I think he's the guy who did all sorts of Warhammer 40k fiction. So, I mean, that works pretty perfectly for the Marvel UK line, which is going for kind of that cyberpunk feel. Don't really recognize any of their names, which, you know, isn't really surprising, considering it's an office that's, you know, not even in North America. The only other name I recognize is Paul Neary, who was editor-in-chief at this time. I mostly know Paul Neary from inking Alan Davis. So anyway, Dr. Necker, I assume this is still Dr. Necker. Yeah, it is, okay. We could tell by the pink hair either way. But yeah, she's reporting that the Minion project is progressing nicely, although there are some weird little glitches in his personality from this whole instinct absorbing process, which seems to be the point of the project. Necker's superiors are like, are you saying that it's defective? It's like, no, it's just weird and we need more money. And it's like, yeah, that's okay. That's pretty much what we expected you to say. Fine, you get more money. By the way, where is Minion now? And she says he's in the year 2456 AD in the Zeta Reticula quadrant in pursuit of target 104. So Minion has eliminated 103 targets before this. But this is a rather large barbarian warrior named of Ledrox. So naturally from there we got to go to Ultima 4 where we can find out more about Ledrox. I got to say, yeah, the story structure in this isn't bad at all. And I like the pacing. It's rather quick and it kind of gets the point nicely. Another thing I kind of like is that Minion has a little bit of a personality. I think I expected him to either be like a Rob Liefeld type badass. I mean, like, you know, I think that was pretty low on the expectation rate because, you know, it is a Marvel UK book. It doesn't really have anything to do with any of the extreme stuff. Just with the look of the book, you know, it was always a possibility. Or just that Minion would not really have any kind of personality. He'd just kind of be a big lumbering robot. But no, Minion's a little sassy. You know, he comes across a little bit like the Professor Hulk character that Peter David, would have just recently introduced in The Incredible Hulk. All right, so we've got Ledrox here. Okay, I mean, that's not a great name, but it's okay because this character is not going to be sticking around. And Ledrox has this woman captive, or this, female alien, who it seems that he's had for a little while, and he uses her as a seer because she's got precognitive powers, but it's not like she can pick and choose when she can see the future, or at least that's what she says. And Ledrox isn't above slapping her around to try and, maybe speed up the process a little bit. Again, nice looking figures. Everything's pretty solid. I like the close-up here. I like the textures he's getting. All the little cross-hatching here. That's good stuff. I will say the inking on this is not bad for, like a guy I don't know. This is all very clear. It's all very clean. The line weights are pretty nice. I think I remembered, again, like these comics having, like, inking that was too thin. Or something, like something was off about it. Even the colors, not bad at all. Nice and vibrant. So anyway, Death's Head arrives, teleports in, right down here, and jumps into battle. And he's actually quite a bit smaller than Ledrox, which you wouldn't assume looking at the Minion character. You figured he'd be bigger than just about everybody. So tries to tackle Ledrox, but Ledrox catches him fairly easily. He's got the forearms going on. And Liam Sharp managed the anatomy on that fairly well. And tosses him down. Is about to use his sword here. It went pretty simple on the sword here. And Minion is able to shoot him into the rock face behind him here, triggering an avalanche right down on top of his head. Fairly good looking stuff. Most of the action, we're not seeing too much of it really because the panels are so small. I mean, I guess this is the panel or a panel that you don't mind being the one to be the focus of the page. And again, interesting that Minion isn't winning his battles through overpowering his enemy. At least not this first one here. It's more through being a little bit more tactical. So Minion emerges from the smoke, and he's, this big, intimidating, monster-looking character, so she's terrified. But he does free her from her shackles. He tells her he's only here for Ledrox. In fact, he's just going to need a couple of seconds with his body. And she tells him, no, wait, he's not dead. I can see a glimpse of the future, and you're going to be fighting him again. And I guess she means the immediate future, because he does emerge from the rubble here, and he's pretty pissed that she seems to be okay with telling Minion's future at the drop of a hat. She doesn't even know the guy. So naturally, Ledrox is going to jump back into the fray. Yeah, gives a good smack to Minion here. Feels like every time they get into a physical confrontation, Minion is going to be the one on the receiving end most of the time. But the Minion gun arm thing here, is it usually a gun arm? Or something. It looks like it was kind of a claw here. It looks like it's got some T-1000 powers. It's about that time for that, which transforms into a blade. Next time Ledrox takes a swing, Minion's able to cut his hand off. This is the UK. They don't mind getting a little bit bloody in their comics. And yeah, manages to get a good hit in, knocks him to the ground, and is able to come up behind him and do his cranial disruption siphon, so the instinct absorption thingy. Very similar kind of panel to the first time that we saw this same attack being used. Again, I'm not super fond of that, but I feel like around this time, Liam Sharp is having to move pretty quickly to keep up with the schedule. He was able to come up with some pretty nice page designs and, put in a fair amount of work on the early stuff. This stuff, it's not quite being skimped on or anything, at least not yet. Towards the end, it gets even skippier than this. But it does feel like he doesn't really have the time to get really intricate and get kind of imaginative. So, the seer girl that Minion saved thanks him for his life, says, "I feel we shall meet again. Farewell, Death's Head," which confuses the hell out of Minion, and he teleports back out. So I imagine this is going to be a recurring character later on. Useful to have a precognitive character as kind of a sidekick just to initiate stories sometimes. So directly after Minion teleports out, Death's Head, like seconds later, teleports in. That's not a bad shot. Not as cool as the ones earlier. Doing some weird shit with the cross-hatching down here. And he is chasing after Minion. And Minion, having just recently teleported out, he's able to trace that teleporter signal again. As Minion teleports back to 2020, back to the AIM headquarters. And Dr. Necker wants to take Minion aside, probably so they can do a full diagnostic and see exactly what's going on with his personality. Minion's like, "We don't have time for that shit. I was able to do the absorption on Ledrox. Now I need you to prep me so I can go out and get the next guy." And Necker's like, "No go, Minion. We've sunk billions into your creation to protect us from some as yet unknown future threat." Because that's apparently the whole deal is they've gotten some kind of intimation. If you have time travel technology, I guess, sure, you can find out that there's going to be some gigantic threat in the future. So this has been their response, is the Minion program. They're going to load them up with the instincts of all sorts of crazy warriors across the timeline. But before they can go either way, either, Dr. Necker wants to run a full diagnostic to see what's wrong with him. Minion just wants to be prepped for his next mission. Death's Head busts in through the big window here. Odd choice for a panel. This feels like a bit of a miscommunication between artist and writer, where it feels like Liam Sharp thought that there was going to be more narration or something in this box. This is the kind of thing that would make me assume that this is being done Marvel method. And Dan Abnett just didn't really take a good look at the page and think that it needed to be filled. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of empty space here that probably should have been Death's Head, busting in this way. So Death's Head starts opening fire on Minion, but doesn't really phase Minion, and Minion kind of reveals that Death's Head was going to be his next target, or at least that's what he says. That was what he said before anyway, which was that after he took care of his next target, he was going to come back around to finding Death's Head. We are repeating some very similar shots here of Death's Head, which again, it speaks to kind of being rushed, where he doesn't have time to come up with the most imaginative stuff. But this is the kind of thing feels like it could be reprinted endlessly for promotion. With the Minion character, looking up all intimidating and shit, with half his face hanging off, saying, "Do I look like I'm kidding?" Like, you could just put that on every goddamn poster ever. Yeah, Minion tackles Death's Head back. This is a pretty great looking panel, actually. It almost gets a little lost, just how much stuff is going on in here. This is another one where he's putting in a fair bit of background, more background figures with all the other AIM workers. And then the colorist is separating them, again, fairly nicely, although you'll kind of lose track of the detail when they do that. That looks pretty great, really, for a decently sized panel. Most of the fighting is going to happen in these smaller panels, which does make it a little tough to see what's going on sometimes. Again, it's a bit of a shame. It feels a little backwards from the way regular Marvel would go, where the big punch is usually the point of the page. But no, he's more focusing on some more of the setup kind of stuff, and then going pretty small on the actual punch panels. We do get more punches per page that way, I guess. And we end this one with him taking a big old swing at Death's Head and, just about cutting his head in half. Death's Head is a cyborg, or maybe even mostly cybernetic. I'm not 100% for sure. So that doesn't kill him, but it's pretty close. And while he's reeling, Minion comes up behind him and is able to sever his head and do the assimilation thingy, where he stabs him in the back of the neck here. But doing the assimilation on Death's Head seems to have introduced something wrong in Minion's system, where he starts overloading, yelling, "Something's wrong." And his hand is morphing and becoming, more bladey. And then, something clicks over in his brain, and he immediately locks on to his next target. Says, "Subject 106, targeting locked on," and starts to teleport out. Necker tries to call him back. Minion's like, "I'll be back, yes?" And that's signifying that the Death's Head instincts that Minion has absorbed are starting to take over his personality, because that's the thing Death's Head does, where he says yes at the end of every sentence. And yeah, finishes teleporting out. They can't really do anything about it. All they can do is track him and find out where his next target is. And turns out his next target is Reed Richards. So that's the big cliffhanger for this issue. And somehow all of Dr. Necker's clothes flew off in between these two panels here. It doesn't even look like the colorist fucked it up, because like she's sitting here in a thong in this one and covering up her boobs, and isn't worrying about any of that shit in this one here. So I don't know what the fuck happened. Maybe Liam Sharp intended this to be later on or something. I don't know. But yeah, she just kind of de-liquefied. Some ads for more Marvel UK stuff with, yeah, Pendragon, Motormouth, Hell's Angel, Digitech, and again, my favorite, Warheads. That's some great shit. And this is apparently what Hell's Angel looks like. And yeah, like, that doesn't look bad at all. Like, that's that's probably better than some of the stuff that's left over at Marvel in 1992. And then on the back, we get almost like an alternate cover. That isn't quite as memorable. Like, this would be a fine issue 2 cover, but not really what you want from issue 1. Like, yeah, it sets up the conflict. Yeah, Minion looks all intimidating and overpowering and shit. And yeah, there's some nice rendering going on in here. There's some nice shading going on. And we're managing to cover up all the feet, which is important. But it isn't quite as memorable as that. I do remember seeing this image quite a bit, in Wizard mostly. So yeah, that's Death's Head 2 number 1. I like it. That's pretty good, I gotta say. Better than I was expecting it to be. I don't know. I had some weird kind of thing about Marvel UK books where I just thought they weren't going to cut it. And I mean, the art is better than just about anything in Marvel at this time, at least in this book. And I gotta say, the writing, kind of the same. Like, it's not otherworldly or anything, but it's certainly competent. And again, Marvel in 1992 couldn't always manage that shit. Like, this was when Marvel's focus was all about art, and DC's was all about writing, or at least that's, felt like the public perception. And then, of course, Marvel offended all of their artists, so they left, which didn't leave them with a whole lot of anything. So I don't know how they managed to maintain, like, market leader status, other than just, like, pure reputation. Anyway, yeah, I think I gotta look into checking out more Marvel UK books, because, like, some of them look like they're pretty goddamn good quality, to be honest. And there's some Marvel UK adjacent stuff that I could also check out. I do have a copy of Clandestine number 1, so I don't think that would be a bad idea to look at all. So maybe in future. Anyway, for this one, that's going to do it. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It helps with all the algorithm stuff. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you really want to help out, in the description, there's a link to my Patreon. If you go subscribe there, that'll give you access to everything I do. So all sorts of videos, everything to do with the Blood Force comic, including everything to do with the Blood Force Kickstarter, which you should be backing today if you haven't already. You can also follow me on Instagram and DM me there for commissions. Although, in the Kickstarter, I'm going to bring it around again, there is a tier available where you can get commissions as well as comics. Why not do 2 for 1? Just saying. Anyway, that's going to do it. Thanks again for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.